Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The Manhwa begins by explaining that outer gods, the absolute entities that had created multiple universes in ancient times, were known as supreme beings. These beings would repeatedly create universes while pursuing eternal life. In that process, numerous substances called souls, and laws were birthed. In this endless cycle, the supreme beings that felt a persistent sense of boredom thought of a way to entertain themselves, and that it was none other than to watch their creations go to war with one another. To the supreme beings, the destruction caused by their creations seemed interesting. Although that meant numerous creations had to fight in those wars, die, and be reborn repeatedly, that was a necessary event to appease the boredom of the supreme beings. While all that was taking place, something happened. A supreme being who was observing the endless wars was killed by his own creation. When the supreme beings from other dimensions found out about that, they all gathered in one spot to observe the world that had lost its master. The death of a fellow supreme being, the fact that he was killed by his own creation. The supreme beings did not care about that, and they all had the same thought. The first to claim an ownerless power would end up becoming its master. It jumps to a school, as we see Sung Suho saying that he got into the Korean National University of Arts. His friends are surprised and tell him that he's lying, and ask him how somebody so untalented could get into an arts university. He laughs at them, saying that he's finally freed from this hell. He hears a man calling out to him, and he is getting congratulated by a man for getting into the university. The man says that he never knew he had such a talent, and asks when he was so talented in drawing. Suho calls him Kim Songkil, but the man says that that's not his name, and that he is actually Lee Yunchul. Suho says he sees, and Yunchul says because of him, his plan to take over the school is ruined. Suho says yes, and it's also thanks to him that he's able to graduate safely. One of the female students tells her friend that Yunchul is doing it again, and says they're about to graduate, so why is he so childish? The other one agrees, saying that it's pathetic for him to harass somebody who lost both of his parents. We see Yunchul rear his fist back for a punch, but Suho is faster, as he grabs the back of his head and knees him in the face, saying that he just wants to live a quiet life until they graduate. Then he is surprised to see that Yunchul hasn't even flinched from the attack, and is confused. Wondering what's going on, we see his fist beginning to release an aura to show that he has awakened, and he says that didn't hurt at all. He goes to swing at Suho, who avoids it and is scared. Everybody else is also surprised as we see it take out a hole inside some metal lockers. Yunchul looks down at his fist, surprised, and Suho begins to realize he almost just died. It jumps to 2 years later, as Suho is walking down the street, and he is now a second-year university student. He looks over to hear people chattering as we see a gate in the middle of the street. The workers outside say that the hunters are currently going to subjugate it, and that everybody needs to please stay away. Some men start talking about how long it's been since they've entered, and we learn that it has been over 8 hours, and that they should be coming out soon. They warn everybody that if they're not the hunter, to stay away once more. Suho starts thinking about it, saying that 3 years ago, gates started to appear in the world, causing everything to change. They were passageways to dungeons, and once a certain amount of time had passed, the monsters inside would come out to kill people. However, people also underwent changes, as if to go against what was happening, especially users that could use mana, called the Awakened, started to appear. With the world changing so rapidly, people thought that chaos would persist for a long time. An Awakened, known as Wu Jinkle, then created the Hunter Association, which gathered the Awakened and created jobs known as hunters, putting an end to the chaos faster than expected. Now the people in the world are divided into Awakened and non-awakened. We see Suho inside of his art class as he is drawing on a canvas. He explains that there are people in the world who can only get rewards by crawling like an ant, but there are also others who can get them easily just by grabbing them. In that situation, the ants quickly realize their own limits. No matter how hard the non-awakened work, they still will not be able to make up for the difference between them and an E-rank awakened. If the hunters cannot close the gates, the world will be destroyed. In other words, without the awakened, the non-awakened can't survive, but the awakened can survive without them. Because of that, everyone is grateful towards them. It is because of them that non-awakened like himself can live so peacefully. On the other hand, he feels uneasy about it as well. He is starting to wonder if he is getting too used to not being able to get what he wants. He talks about his missing parents as we see a picture of both Sung Jinwoo and Cha Hae-in. He says the fact that his survival relies on others and the time when it seemed like he could do anything had all long gone and been filled with nothing but a sense of powerlessness. Hae-in always said that he resembled his dad, and he wonders how his dad would get out of the situation he is in now. He hears someone calling out to him, and he snaps out of it. His teacher tells him that he is focusing pretty well today, and asks what he is having so much fun drawing. Suho says that he just drew based on how he felt. His teacher comments on his art looking pretty creative, then says it kinda looks more human, and Suho wonders why he drew such a thing. As we see a familiar looking Beru, it jumps back to the gate outside of his school as the hunters are finally exiting, and we see that they all look pretty relaxed, which means their raid went well. One of the workers thanks the man, who we learn is named Kim Jong-soo. Jong-soo says that they also have information that needs to be reported ASAP, and that they ran into a new type of monster. It is a humanoid that could spew flames from its eyes and mouth. It attacked with its claws and fangs, but it didn't do much damage. He got scratched a little by its attack, but nothing happened. The worker says that it is definitely a monster that has not been spotted, and he is glad it wasn't dangerous, and in that case, Jong-soo will need to submit a simple report on what happened. We see the wound from Jong-soo begin to spout blue flames as he loses complete control of his body. He drops both of his weapons onto the floor, and the worker calls out to him only to be greeted by his mouth instead, as he starts to get a chunk bitten out of him. The other hunters look in fear and are confused about what is going on. One of them realizes that the flames look the exact same as the ones inside the dungeon, and then she quickly gets eaten as well. Everybody begins to run for their lives as it starts to spread from person to person like a zombie outbreak. In Suho's classroom, he hears the screaming outside, and everybody runs over to the window wondering what is going on. He feels fear as everybody outside is attacking one another, and they start to realize that everybody looks like monsters, and it might be a dungeon break. One of them asks if they are trying to win the Darwin Award, saying that they need to get out of here, and another suggests they just wait for hunters. They call out to their teacher named Lim, asking him to do something since he isn't awakened, but he says that he is only E rank. Suho sees one of the infected on the other roof and sees it crouched down. It begins to leap across as he tells everybody to run away. He ducks to avoid it as it barrels past him trying to eat him. They start to run away, leaving their classmates behind. One of the girls falls over and starts to cry as her legs give out, and she begs Suho to help her. He looks away and closes his eyes out of regret and begins to run away, saying he will go get the hunters. He wonders why he said that, saying it is the same as asking her to die, but there is nothing a non-awakened like him can do. He starts thinking about how powerless he is and wonders what his dad Jinwoo would do in the same situation. As the monster finishes eating her classmate, it begins to slowly walk towards the girl, and she begins to cry while shaking. The monster opens its mouth and screeches while running over to eat her. We see it is quickly greeted by something red as Suho has come back with a fire extinguisher, and he knocks the monster in the face. He says if his dad were here, he would definitely fight back. A status window begins to glitch out onto his screen and says that he has met all the requirements to complete the secret quest, Courage of the Weak. Suho explains how he used to have a dream that resembled a game. In order to defeat the monsters, he progressively got stronger every floor, and he leveled up and fought them again and again. This was covered in one of the solo leveling extra chapters. He says as monsters got stronger, he too needed to match their growth, and so through the numerous challenges, he finally ended up reaching the highest floor possible. The final boss he encountered was powerful, though. He was his enemy, but he couldn't help but feel envious and even awed by his power. And for some reason, the final boss was none other than his father, who asked him if the game was fun. It's probably because the image he had of his dad was reflected in his dream, and that his dad was strong and reliable. And he wonders how he was able to become so powerful. It shows Suho getting the fire extinguisher and running back, saying if he was in this situation, this is the exact same thing he would do. We see the monster reeling from the attack, and he wonders what to do now, saying that he heard the attacks of the non-awakened don't work against them, and he realizes that he has charged in too recklessly. He opens his eyes wider as he is surprised to see that everything has been frozen in time. The girl's tears are stopped in the air, and so is the monster. He looks down at the status screen, saying that he is now qualified to become a player, asking if he accepts. He says this situation is just like that dream. If he can fight like he did there, what reason does he have not to accept it in this desperate situation? He mumbles accept, and a bright light shines from the classroom. He has now become a player, and he has been given great spellcaster Kondiru's blessing. It will ensure that he will always be healthy and strong during his lifetime. He has obtained the permanent effect of longevity, which means that all diseases, poisons, and status effects are healed, and sleeping will increase regeneration ability. Another window appears, stating that the system will help the player develop, and that this is not a dream, and he only has one life, so be aware. Now he actually has access to his status window, and he says it's just like he thought. A new quest appears called Tutorial, and he needs to defeat the Mistburn and level up. He sees above the monster's name it is a D-rank Mistburn. He tells the female student to quickly run, and that he can tell now 2 of the enemies are non-awakened, and 1 is. They start to leap at him, and he wonders if he really did awaken and begins to sweat with excitement. He smacks one of the enemies in the face by throwing the extinguisher at it. As it's falling from the attack, we see him rear his fist back, and he apologizes to the student as he uppercuts her into the ceiling. He is surprised by his strength and asks if he really just one-shot at her. Another monster comes in from the side, and he sidesteps the attack, responding with a kick to the side, instantly one-shotting it as well. Now he has leveled up and completed the tutorial, and he has the option to look at the reward for completing it. He says that now he is certain that he actually did awaken. As he hits the awakened monster in the face, he realizes that the monster is still standing, which catches him off guard. The monster swings towards him, and he does his best to avoid it, but we see it leave claw marks on his chest. Suho puts his foot on it and then pushes away to create distance. He says he'll turn into a magic beast if it wounds him, and he wonders if he is going to become one right after awakening. But due to the effects of longevity, we already know that will not be the case, as he instantly heals, and he says that he completely forgot about reading this a minute ago. He gets slammed into the floor by the monster and says if he is weaker than the D rank who became a magic beast, it means he is an E rank, and that he needs to stop worrying about the ranks. The monster goes in for a sloppy kiss, and he realizes that there has to be something he can do. Then he recalls the rewards and accepts them. He is given 5 stat points to spread out, and he puts 3 into his strength. He starts to scream and throws the monster over him. The monster lands on its feet, but it is instantly met by Suho's fist. The monster goes in for another attack and scratches him once more. He says even with the strength increase, he still can't defeat this, and decides to put the other 5 points into strength as well, going from 14 to 19. He clenches his fist, saying that an awakened who levels up has never been heard of before. He punches the monster in the mouth, causing its teeth to shatter out, and he says that ranks are decided upon awakening, and no awakened became stronger than the rank they were given. Though he doesn't know who determines the ranks and the non-awakened, if he got the power to escape from that structure, that's all he needed. On the other side of the classroom, we see a TV fall off the wall as it begins to crack. We see that it was from Suho's punch to the monster's stomach, causing it to fly through the wall. Suho grits his teeth and follows it up with another punch to the face, causing the monster to go flying across the room. He's a little gassed out and looks down at his fist, and we see that he has defeated the monster and leveled up 3 times. He falls to the floor, and the reality of him being awakened sets in. He hears a scream and says that he can't give up, and that he has to help now, as it's his duty is to save people in crisis. We see someone dragging their feet outside as their sword drags on the floor. They leap up, and Suho looks out the window, wondering what's going on. We see that it is none other than Jongsu, leaping in for an attack, and that he is a C-rank monster now. And we see his attack leave a massive explosion. Some sirens start to blare off, giving an alert that there is a dungeon break at the Korea University of Arts, and they request all civilians within the area to evacuate. We see soldiers standing there, waiting on something. One of them says that people are dying, but all they can do is stand and watch, and wonders when the Hunter Association is going to arrive. One of the men tells him that it seems it's taking some time to assign a hunter of rank B or above. The commander says that this is supposed to be a D rank, so why do they need someone so high? And the man says that the association is taking into consideration that hunters were infected. And he shows him that Jongsu, a C-rank hunter, was also infected. As we see him walk through the window by Suho, Suho wonders what happened. And he is as confused, asking if he really jumped up here from the ground, and how, since this one has a weapon, it's going to be different from the previous mist burns. He wonders if he even stands a chance with his level up, and narrowly avoids Jongsu's attack as it slices through the building behind him. Suho puts his back to the wall, saying that this shit is nuts. And we see the fire extinguisher flying through the air towards Jongsu, but he cuts it in half. Suho takes this chance to sidestep, and as the fire extinguisher begins to explode, he runs out into the hallway, saying that there's no way he can face a monster like this. He wonders when the other hunters will get here, saying that he just needs to hold out until they do. Jongsu follows him into the hallway, and then hears something to his left. He looks up at it, and Suho wonders what he's looking at, and quickly realizes that it is other students on the roof. Jongsu doesn't miss a beat, and is instantly leaping at them. Suho hears him attack, as we don't see the women standing there anymore. He grits his teeth, and realizes that he has to go help, and that there's no time to wait for a hunter. He jumps up, kicking Jongsu in the back of the head, saying that he needs to stop him here. But his kick was ineffective, and Jongsu turns, swinging his sword at him. He realizes that just a single hit, and he will be dead. But he cannot let him run loose, as we see the women bleeding out on the floor. He returns with a barrage of punches to his stomach, and then starts to avoid each and every attack. Every time he dodges, he's trading a blow on Jongsu. Suho stretches his hands out, grabbing onto the back of Jongsu's head, pulling him in, and kneeing him in the face. Jongsu tightens the grip on his blade, swinging it, cutting Suho straight through the stomach. Suho begins to spit up blood, and then is kicked away into the wall on the opposite side of the roof. He spits out even more blood, and begins to lose consciousness, as we see that he only has 1 health point remaining. He says that he must have lucked out, and that the system does not want him to fail yet. We see the space around them slowly begin to crack, as Jongsu starts to get more excited. Suho takes a stance, and it keeps continuing to crack. Jongsu leaps in, and we see that Suho's fatigue is 99. His eyes begin to go blurry, and he realizes that he's screwed, as he starts to fall unconscious as Jongsu attacks. The shattering behind continues, as we see it fully crack open now, and a purple shadow leaps from it, flying straight towards the roof. As Jongsu goes in for the attack, we see his arm go flying through the air. Suho looks up, wondering why he sees an ant, and we hear Beru saying no, it was all because he was late. He begins to heal Suho, and then turns towards Jongsu, saying that they must be the lowly pest that dared to harm His Highness. He A-trains straight through Jongsu, causing him to turn to a red mist. We see another monster coming towards Lim, and he starts to scream for somebody to help, as we see it also gets A-trained. This happens to every single monster in the vicinity, as Beru takes them out one by one, in rapid succession, leaving nothing but body parts behind. He's moving so fast, he's shattering all of the glass in the building, as Bro is breaking sound barriers. The area instantly brightens up, and everybody wonders what's going on. Back on the roof, we see Beru kneeling, as he tells Suho it's been a long time, calling him the young monarch. It jumps to a young Suho drawing all of Jinwoo's shadow summons on paper. He looks up after hearing something and is excited to see Beru with an apron. Beru picks it up, asking if he is drawing him, and begins to cry, saying that he is touched. Suho then snaps out of it as he wakes up in a hospital. He stares at the ceiling, wondering what's going on. He then starts getting chewed out on the phone, asking if he is okay, and says that the world is going crazy and that he'll send a few bodyguards. Suho tells his uncle that he's fine, and we learn that it's been 2 days since the incident, and that due to all the casualties, it became a hot topic. The discovery of mistburns, a monster that can infect even hunters, along with the association's delayed response to the incident even though it happened in the middle of the city, and what the hunters saw when they arrived all remain topics of debate. The mistburns were all dead due to something unknown. We see one of the students saying that everybody just suddenly exploded in front of him. Suho cuts the TV off and looks to his side, saying that as expected, his awakening was in a dream. Moreover, he's an awakener who gets stronger as he levels up. He says that he thought he was cut by a C rank, so how did he survive that? We hear Beru saying that's because he got rid of the trash. Suho is confused, and looks at the floor to see his shadow, and Beru says that it's been a long time, and begins to cry, asking him when he grew up so wonderfully, saying that he can't help but feel overwhelmed with emotions. Suho says that his scattered memories began flooding back in, and that he knows this ant, and when he was young, he was one of the dark creatures that stayed with him, and he forgot him until now. We see Beru saying that he has crossed dimensions to meet him. Suho wonders why he lived with such creatures when he was young, and he's very curious about it all. He says from what he remembers, he doesn't think he should be this small. Beru says it's an effect of consuming a lot of mana while crossing dimensions, and is usually dashing and menacing. Suho says that his system window says that he has a private grade, though. Beru panics, saying that he's actually a martial grade, and that the system is just making fun of him. Suho sits up, saying that he got better because of him too, and Beru blushes, saying that he may not look it, but he is a skilled healer, and his goal for coming here was to release his seal, but he didn't expect him to do it himself, and he is impressed. Suho asks if it's related to the dream he had, and Beru says that he may think it's a dream, but it's all things he actually experienced, and that he is much stronger than when they fought each other, and that the great Shadow Monarch Sung Jinwoo sealed his powers along with his memories because he just wanted him to have a normal life. Suho grabs onto him, saying that he, as he expected, really is related to his dad and wonders why he left home. Beru says that he actually went to outer space. Suho asks why the hell he would do that, and Beru says to put it simply, and he begins to use shadows to explain it. He says the Great Shadow Monarch left for outer space and is at war with invaders who are trying to take over the world. Suho is confused, asking if his father is part of the Avengers, and Beru says yes, and that they are beings from Itarum, gods of outer space. Itarum are sending their apostles and invading their world. While on his way to meet Suho, he tore apart countless enemies. The fact that gates and monsters are appearing on Earth must have been this war's influence as well. Suho looks curious and asks if his mother went as well. Beru says no, and he explains that she went missing on the day that his father disappeared, so he thought they'd be together. Beru lets out a panic scream since he did not know she was missing, and says that the apostles of Itarum must have created some kind of evil trap. Suho asks if it's because of those same bastards that his parents cannot return. Beru asks if he wants to meet them, and Suho shakes, saying of course, and he's been alone for so many years. Beru tells him that there's only one way. The Lord won't be able to come to Earth for a while due to the war, but the young monarch can find and rescue his mother after he gets stronger, and Beru tells him it's time to level up. A quest has arrived, and we see that it is the trial of the Shadow. A window explains that he is the son of the Shadow Monarch, and that his talents have been sealed, and that he'll have to prove his worth and enter the Shadow Dungeon. And he is holding the Shadow Dungeon key that Beru gave him, and that it can be used on his own shadow. Beru tells him to plug it into the wall where his shadow is. Suho sticks it into it, and then unlocks it, creating a gate from where his shadow was. Beru tells him to go ahead and enter and take all the power that should belong to him. Suho is still in disbelief, saying that outer space, the war with the gods, or even the Shadow Monarch, none of it makes sense to him, but still, if he can meet them again by getting stronger, he'll level up as much as he can to make that happen. Beru watches and starts to recall Jinwoo telling him to go to Earth and release Suho's seal, as Itarum's invasion may have spread to Earth, and that he needs to return Suho's powers and memories and protect Earth, and he'll allow him to act at his own discretion depending on the situation. Beru says that if he's leaving the rest to his own judgment and the fact that he saw Suho bodied on the floor, he shall stay here by Suho's side and watch over his growth. They enter the portal, and it vanishes from the other side. As they enter, Beru explains that this place is the land of the dead, where the living can't step foot inside without the master's permission, in other words, the Shadow Dungeon. Suho looks around, saying that it's closer to a ruined city than a dungeon, but for some reason, it feels familiar to him. A window appears, giving him a quest to survive, explaining that the denizens of the Shadow Dungeon will never accept his weak self as the master of this land, and that he has to survive for 4 hours. Beru tells him to please stay on guard, as the time of suffering will soon arrive. Suho asks what he's talking about, and we see a goblin leaping at him from the top ropes. Suho's spidey sense tingles, and he kicks it in the stomach, saying that surprised him. We see it's a goblin scout. Beru says that if it's a scout, it means there are others nearby. Suho says that he'll deal with it before it calls for its allies. Beru says that it's true that goblins are weak and feeble, but that's reckless. Suho says that since its name is not colored, it means he's on the same level or weaker than him. He hits the goblin's arm, causing it to drop its axe, and then snatches the axe out of the air, cracking it in the skull. He looks at Beru, saying there he goes. The ones stronger than him have colored names, as he learned this a few days ago. Beru says he sees, and then they hear a horn get blown anyway. They both look up to see one of the goblins on a signpost, and Suho says that it looks like there was another scout. More goblins begin to make their appearance, this time with some with orange names, and still some with white. Suho asks Beru if he's going to help him, and Beru says he wished he could, but due to being so far away from the monarch, his mana isn't being replenished, so he has to preserve as much strength as possible, and if he intervenes in this battle, the experience he will obtain will be greatly decreased. Suho says he just had to explain that he was not going to be helpful. The monsters start to leap in, and Suho says he wants to test something. We see him use his power to grab onto the axe from afar, and pulls it out of the corpse, causing it to swing through the crowd. He says that he wanted to test out this skill in his status window, as we see it as the ruler's authority. He says he feels like he has an invisible hand now. He dodges an attack, grabbing onto an arrow, saying that since there are archers, he'll treat it the same way they treat him, and then draws a bowstring using his ruler's authority, saying that they can have this back, launching an arrow into its head. Beru compliments his adaptability, saying that the young monarch's childhood was like the birth of a legendary hero in myths. Even then, he was able to use the ruler's authority he had inherited from the monarch as he pleased. However, that power was created to destroy everything, so it only acted as a hindrance in this peaceful world. Now, as the apostles of Itarum are invading Earth, the young monarch's power has begun to shed light on this world. Suho levels up, and says that the weight limit for his skill is around 10 kilograms. His carelessness gets him stabbed in the side, and we see a goblin smiling and laughing about it. Suho backfists it, and Beru calls out to him, telling him to stay on guard. All the goblins surround him, and we see one of the orange names, Centurion, start to make its appearance. Suho loses 30 health from that attack, and pulls the knife out, saying that it hurts. He does not plan to give up, as he heaves the knife through the front line of the goblins towards the Centurion. We can't tell if it was a direct hit or not. But we see it hit its chest. Suho says he feels more alive than when he was powerless. He uses his ruler's authority to quickly dispatch the goblins surrounding him, as his health starts to tick down more and more as the fight continues. He grabs back onto his knife, and we see he's below half now, and he charges in for another attack towards the Centurion. They quickly surround him, and it cuts to a status screen, saying that he has learned the skill Resilience, and that he has gotten 5 level ups. We see blood on the floor, as goblin corpses are strewn out along the city, as well as the Centurion, dead on the floor. Suho sighs as we see his 4-hour time limit has been completed. Beru claps, saying that was amazing, and he never doubted that he would overcome this trial. Suho is annoyed that Beru didn't help until the very end. A status screen appears, telling him that he can check his rewards, and he does. One of them is called Shadow Extraction. Beru is excited, since this is a very familiar skill to him, and Suho says that now that he thinks about it, he did get a skill called Resilience while fighting too, and it looks like he got skills on top of the level up system, and that this seems kind of broken. He says that it's kind of like becoming a cheat character, and Beru explains that the level up mechanism is based on the system the Monarch used in the past. It is a support system designed to ensure safety as they grow. Beru says to put it in manhwa titles, it is the I thought I was an unawakened, but I was actually born with the strongest shadow silver spoon. Suho cringes, saying okay, and he just wants his reward. He gets the runestone for shadow extraction. Beru gives him the TLDR, which is that it is a skill to turn corpses into soldiers like himself. Suho says that it's kind of like necromancy then, and that if he wants to command soldiers, he'll need to hunt them first. That means he can only control those weaker than him, and that he heard that summon type skills are looked down upon in the industry. Suho sticks his hand out and says shadow extraction, but it does not work, and he realizes that he has to come up with a separate command for the skill, and calls it tedious. Beru begins to get excited and blushes, as Suho says it needs to be a direct command rather than asking them to fight for him. He sticks his hand out, releasing all of his power, and says the iconic line, "Arise." We see the goblin shadow slowly start to rise up and form into shadow goblins, and there are 3 of them. Suho is surprised and says that it's much less impressive than he expected. The monsters feel like they just caught a stray, and they start crying. Beru explains that usually when they are extracted, they are weaker than they were in life. Suho asks why they are so much smaller. Beru says it happens. Suho then asks how much weaker they are. Beru says just by a little bit. Suho adds that it seems even more useless since they disappear after a day. Beru asks if he doesn't have a skill called shadow storage. Suho says no. Beru gets sad, saying that he thinks it's because the intelligence, stat, and level affects shadow authority, and that it's a really good skill later on. It's actually one of the best. Suho says that he understands, and to quit looking so depressed. His stomach starts to rumble, and he says that he hasn't eaten in about 2 days, and asks Beru how they get out of here, who tells him that he can leave any time by using the shadow key. Suho says alright, it's time to go eat, and then he exits the dungeon. We see him pogging out of his gourd while eating, saying that he didn't know hospital food could taste this good. Beru says that he'll explain what he needs to do from now on, and that he has 3 missions in total. First, protect Earth from the outer space monsters. Suho asks if he should just go into dungeons and hunt monsters. Beru says yes. As he hunts the monsters, he'll level up, and the stronger he'll be, which means Earth will be safe. Second, he has to find Heian no matter what. Suho asks if there's a way to figure out where she is. Beru says as he hunts the space monsters, he should eventually find a clue. The third is the most important, and that is recovering his power. He can't believe he's just a private grade, and he wants to show him his true power. Suho asks what he needs to recover his power, and Beru says he can absorb a portion of the target's magic and knowledge by consuming them. It's an inefficient method from before he became a shadow soldier, but he has no other choice right now since he can't get magic from the Monarch, and that he just needs to eat something with magic. Suho says that every one of these tasks is just asking him to get into dungeons. He finishes his food, saying it's time to get ready. Beru says that since he needs a license to enter dungeons, they need to go to the Hunters Association for a magic measurement. Suho thinks about it and how he is an awakener who levels up, and he wonders what rank he'll get, saying maybe he'll get nest rank. Of course, since this is solo leveling too, his magic level is only 46, and he is classified as an E rank hunter. Outside of the association, we see him leaving, and Beru says that he heard ranks are decided by magic levels, and it's obvious his rank is lower since he's focused on raising his strength. Suho says he doesn't have to go out as a way to comfort him, and it only makes him feel worse, and he wonders if he'll even be able to protect the earth at this rate. Beru reminds him that he can level up, and Suho says that he's heard raiding parties rarely hire E rank and F rank hunters, and at this rate, getting into a dungeon itself will be hard. Then he realizes something and thinks there might actually be one way. He explains how the strike squad raids the dungeon, the hauling team follows behind and collects the monsters' corpses, and the mining team extracts resources from the dungeon in the back lines. Except for the strike squad, the other teams accept E rank hunters, so he will be able to enter. We see him mining away on some crystals, and he sighs. We see him thanking Lim for introducing him here, saying that he is just the only awakened he knows. If you don't remember, Lim was his teacher. Suho says he's glad he has a senior awakening nearby, and he can even work in dungeons thanks to him. Lim calls out to him and bows, apologizing about the incident at the university. He says he regrets how he acted, as the only awakening, he shouldn't have gotten scared and run away, and he apologizes for not doing anything. Suho tells him to raise his head, saying that he's also an E rank like him, and that the association advises E ranks like them to run away when they see beasts, and that he just follow the guidelines. Lim is surprised, asking him if he is an E rank. Suho explains what his mana level is and says that that is impossible, as when he saw him fighting the magic beast on the rooftop, it didn't look like he was weak, and he wonders if he maybe saw it wrong. He says it's even more impressive that an E rank got attacked and survived, and Beru says that is indeed extraordinary. Lim turns to his side, wondering who the hell is talking, and then falls to the floor, thinking that it's a magic beast. Suho asks him why he suddenly came out, and Beru says that right now he's as weak as a larva, and he can only be at peace if he stays here and protects him. Lim quickly gets up and asks if he awoke as a summoner. Suho says yes. Lim says that many E ranks don't have skills, calling him lucky, and for his information, he has a running skill. Suho says that must be why he's so good at doing it. Lim gets depressed, and Suho tells him it was only a joke. Beru floats around him, saying that as expected of the young monarch, he's completely crushed his mental. Suho says come to think of it, this is his first time inside of a dungeon besides the Shadow One, and he wonders if the strike squad is up ahead hunting the monsters. We see them stabbing a wolf in the throat, saying that the dungeon is empty. One of the men says that only wolf types have been popping up and that their pelts aren't worth much. Another one of the men tells them not to let their guards down, and they're never too sure about a dungeon until it comes to an end. One of the men tells them that there's something in the side path. We start to get a familiar vibe from the first solo leveling as they enter a weird ritual room. One of the men suggests they go back and request backup, but another one tells them that their detection skills aren't picking up any magic beasts. One of them suggests that there might even be hidden treasure here instead of a boss monster, as we see a sword stabbed into the ground. One of them is surprised, saying he didn't actually expect this, and they start to pog out about the fact they hit the jackpot. They need to appraise it to be sure, but it looks amazing. One of the men named Kim Young-jun goes to reach out for the blade, and they try telling him to stop as there's usually traps. He says that he's a C-rank tank, so he can easily handle it. As he grabs onto it, he begins to feel an immense pressure, and he wonders what is going on as he only sees blood around him. Then he gets eaten mentally. The blade comes out of the ground, and his men sigh, saying that it looks like there are no traps. One of the men calls out to him, telling him to be more careful next time, but Young-jun is already consumed by whatever is inside of the sword, and tells the man he got ahead of himself. The rest see this and begin to feel fear. We hear Young-jun asking them why they dare to covet the sword of the Monarch of Fangs. We see from Young-jun's perspective, the only thing he can hear is that he needs to kill the intruders inside of his domain, as we see his friends making fearful expressions as he cuts them down one by one. We see that he's completely lost his rationality, and that the only thing he is doing is following orders. Back to the miners, we see them going crazy, and some of the other workers wonder what's going on, asking if there was a summoning skill like that, as we see the goblins putting in some work. Lim says that he heard summoners can only summon 1 or 2 creatures at once, that he summoned 3, 4 if he includes the talking ghost, and says that Suho's power is abnormal. Suho's happy, saying that it's inconvenient that he can only summon up to 3 and he needs a corpse to use the skill, but it's not too bad since he can take and use a corpse from the shadow dungeon. It's convenient because it does menial labor in his stead without complaints, and says that it seems like a pretty decent skill just as Beru told him. Beru tells him not to compliment him after asking them to do miscellaneous tasks, and asking if he entered here to level up. Suho explains that it's because an E-rank hunter can't enter a dungeon on their own, and that he's heard that the measuring device still gets a lot of errors, so he's thinking of getting a reassessment once he increases his mana, and that they can do their 3rd mission here. Beru asks if it's about him recovering his power, and Suho says that he could recover by eating stuff containing mana, and explains that even these magic stone fragments on the floor contain mana. Beru says not to tell him, and Suho throws him on the ground, saying that since he's useless for gathering magic stones, he should just eat the ones off the ground while he's meditating. We see Beru start munching. Then he starts to feel something, and calls out to Suho, telling him that he felt a monarch's presence. Suho asks if he's talking about his father, and Beru says no, more than one existence holds the rank of a monarch. And if it was Jinwoo, then his powers would have recovered instantly, and that he recognizes this beastly scent. We see some workers deeper in the mine wondering what that sound is, and they say that it was where the strike squad was headed. We see some glowing eyes from the cave in front of them as the wolves begin to walk towards them. One of them screams, telling the rest that the magic beasts are here, and he tells everybody to run away. We see one of them panic swinging towards them, telling them not to get close. The monster bites onto his pickaxe, and instantly shatters it. The man starts to scream for help, and Suho comes from the side with an attack. He tells them that he'll buy them time so they can escape the dungeon. The man thanks him, leaving him to fend off the wolves by himself. Suho glances at them, realizing that their names are orange. It must be implying that they're on a similar level as the D-rank Mistburn he fought, and that he is capable of winning on his own. If he was alone, that is, as we see Lim shaking behind him. He tells Lim that he can run, but Lim says that he's trying to help everybody, and he's not going to run away on his own anymore. Suho says if that's the case, to help him when he's in danger, and that 3 goblins should be enough to guard him. He opens his inventory, and says that the goblin weapons he gathered in the shadow dungeon should be way better than a pickaxe. Lim is surprised that he summoned a weapon, and wonders what kind of skill he even has. Suho quickly dashes off the floor, heading straight into the monsters. One of them opens its mouth, and Suho does not hesitate to instantly cut it in half, one-shotting it. The goblins cheer him on. Lim is surprised. Suho then hits the iconic Arise line, as we see him extracting the shadow of one of the wolves. One of the goblins disappears, and they scream, watching their friend get replaced. All the while, Suho takes care of one of the wolves. As the shadow wolf goes for the throat on the other. Beru says his adaptability is frightening. Suho says that once he gets more mana, and the number of extractions increases, he might even be able to make an army. He then brings his blade back, stabbing another wolf in the mouth, saying that it's time to add one more to the group. Another goblin disappears, leaving only one left as he looks around and begins to cry as he survived the battle royale. Then he sees the notification that they defeated the other wolf, and he begins to cry, realizing that his time is up, as Suho arises that wolf as well. Lin calls out to him, saying that he doesn't have E-rank physical abilities, and that he's even able to tame dead magic beasts. Suho wonders how he's meant to explain this to him. Lim wonders if he's maybe a false ranker that lied about his ability. Suho looks down as he sees a quest, saying that he needs to defeat the enemies, but there's only one to defeat. Suho is confused, saying he's already defeated all of the wolves, asking if this means there's another enemy. We see footsteps coming out, and Lim recognizes him, saying that he's from the strike squad. He walks towards him, saying that he's a lifesaver, and explains that the beast suddenly came here, which could have been bad, asking him what happened. Suho tries to tell him that it's dangerous, and we see Lim realize that once he makes eye contact with Yongjun, as he has the eyes of a monster. Yongjun instantly starts to swing down on him, and Suho pulls Lim away, leaving only his glasses behind to be destroyed. We see the attack would have turned him into a meat crayon, and Suho tells his wolves team to get to work. They all leap towards Yongjun, and Suho starts to drag Lim away, saying that he can't believe another hunter has lost their senses, and wonders when it became a trend for them to all turn into magic beasts. And moreover, due to the name being so red, it means that he is very dangerous, and he knows how powerful a red name is, due to his experience previously. He then confirms with Beru that he's not a monarch like his father. Beru says although he possesses the energy, he is much too weak to be called one, but that doesn't mean he could face him in his current state. Suho says that's all he needed to hear, and Beru asks if he's planning to fight. Suho says that he told him that the system provides assistance to ensure his stable growth, and since it gave him a quest, that must mean he can potentially win. Most importantly, in order to see his parents, he needs to get stronger. We see the three wolves leaping towards Yongjun as he cuts them in half, and Yongjun begins to smile menacingly. Suho says he'll defeat a red name right here, and grow substantially from it. Beru is touched by how Suho is saying even though he has faced a lot of trials time and time again, he never runs away, and even though he is so weak, you can see the aura of a monarch from him. He tells Suho that the true form is the sword. If he cuts off the arm and separates it from the host, he won't be able to move anymore. We see the wolves that were cut apart begin to form again around him. Yongjun turns, screaming as they all start to jump him from all sides. One of them bites onto the sword, and Suho is surprised that they got up again just because he poured mana into them. Beru explains that shadow soldiers have astral forms. As long as he has mana, they can always regenerate, asking him what he thinks about their power now. He says all of this, yet the wolves are just instantly taken care of like fodder, and Suho looks at him, asking what he was talking about. Beru nervously sweats, saying that it's only because his mana is weak. Yongjun begins to speak, drawing Suho's attention as he asks how an insignificant pest like him can use the Shadow Monarch's power. Suho is surprised he can talk, and Beru asks how he dares to call the blood of the Shadow Monarch an insignificant pest. Yongjun starts to shake, saying he can't believe they would meet here, and that he is the Monarch of Fang's enemy. A dagger flies in, and Yongjun blocks it instantly, along with a follow-up attack. Suho says it's time to start the actual fight. Every single time he throws an attack towards Yongjun, it is instantly taken care of. Suho says, as expected of a red name, it can easily take this much. He looks at all the weapons gathered around him, and he realizes that he won't be able to beat him with quality, so he stretches his hand out, saying he has to win through quantity and starts sending out each and every one of the weapons at Yongjun again. Yongjun starts to deflect them out of the air, and Beru says this is his aptitude for ruler's authority, which he showed since he was an infant. However, it doesn't seem to be having much value as none of his attacks are piercing through Yongjun's defense. Suho goes for a thrust but realizes this was a bad move as his dagger is instantly cut off. Yongjun then starts to come for a follow-up, and Suho avoids attack after attack, saying it's the same thing as having no way to fight back, and if a single attack lands, he is dead, but he also can't drag this out as his chance of winning will get worse and worse. Yongjun asks if he's gonna keep running away like a coward, saying that his father must also be one too, and he must be someone who hides behind his shadow soldiers. Suho says shit-talking somebody's parents is crazy. Even though he's being provoked, he's not confident that he can fight him and wishes that he had more strength. He asks Beru why his power from when he climbed the tower hasn't returned if his seal has been released. Beru explains that his power was sealed when he was an infant, and it would be better to think of it as if he's regaining his talent from that time. If he had that power, it would certainly be more than enough to go against Itarum. However, that place was neither a dream nor reality. It was merely a test to see if he could deal with his talent. His physical strength was expected to disappear whether he passed the test or not. Suho says it really was just a game then, and Beru says his experience in the tower was by no means useless, that he needs to try to recall it and feel his fighting spirit. Suho says he can clearly remember his feelings from back then as at the tower. He mostly fought with his fist, and if only he had a gauntlet like back then. He then recalls how Beru was talking about their forms being astral, and he says that this means he could change their forms however he wants. He has an idea. He gets the dog boys back up, and Yongjun swings, asking if he doesn't realize that his plan won't work. The wolves leap up, and Yongjun says he'll cut them down first, but we see the wolves slowly beginning to shift as they began to form around Suho's fists. Yongjun strikes down, and we hear a loud clang. Yongjun thinks his attack worked, but he's in for a rude awakening as he looks down to see that Suho has blocked it by turning the dog boys into gauntlets, which has leveled up his shadow extraction skill. Now he can change the form of shadow soldiers as he pleases. He says with this, his hand-to-hand combat is easily doable now. He starts trading blows with Yongjun. Beru sits there, surprised, saying to turn shadow soldiers into his weapons is crazy, and that the Shadow Monarch who infinitely transcends levels stood in a position to freely control shadows. However, the young monarch has only just learned shadow authority, putting him at the level of an ant larva that just hatched, and to think he would instantly go to the next step without anybody teaching him. His combat IQ, along with his aptitude for ruler's authority, and now even his practical use of this skill to distract Yongjun, shows that this dude is just built different. We see him come in for an attack, hitting Yang Jun directly in the stomach, causing him to go flying backward into the cave wall, and that the attack is definitely successful as Yang Jun lets out a scream in pain. Suho dashes in and begins to use ruler's authority to pull all of the weapons from the floor, launching them all towards Yang Jun, and while Yang Jun begins to feel overwhelmed, he takes the chance to cut his arm off, and Beru says once more that Suho is an actual prodigy. Suho says that he was worried because his name was red, but he was not unbeatable. Beru says that he didn't doubt his victory for a moment. Suho says that is obviously cap. Still, he learned a new way to fight in this battle, so it's not too bad of a reward, and that he should check the actual rewards while he's at it. He is given the rune stone for Storm Slash, and he learns it. We see that it is a skill that imbues the wind into his attack. He says he wanted this skill the most, and then he decides to give it a test. He gets rid of the gauntlets, saying that he needs a sword, and he sees it on the ground. As we hear the sword saying this is humiliating, to think that he would suffer defeat at the hands of the Shadow Monarch's blood of all people, but says that it's not over yet, as the bottomless greed of humans will feed him once more, and the moment he grabs him, his greed shall swallow him whole. But for some reason, when he goes to bite him, that is not the case. The sword is even confused, and we see that Suho obtains the item, Rakan's Fang. He says it looks a whole lot better than a goblin's weapon. Fang is surprised, asking how he wasn't dominated by him, but of course we know it's due to Kondiru's blessing longevity. For some reason, Suho instantly goes into reverse grip, and starts swinging the thing around, using Storm Slash to destroy some of the walls nearby. He says it seems problematic that a single use drains his mana, but he likes its power. Beru says that his response to shadow extraction was much too lukewarm in comparison, and that the power of a shadow is already hundreds of thousands of times more amazing. Lim starts to wake up, and Suho asks how he is. Lim asks what happened, but Suho says it's too long of a story, asking if he can explain it on the way out, as he sees Youngho beside him without an arm. Outside of the gate, we see everybody sitting there, and Suho says he's going to go in and check if there are more survivors. Lim watches him, saying that an E rank with a summoning skill shouldn't make him stand out so much, and he wonders how he's so strong, but decides it doesn't matter right now, and what's more important is that he rescued everybody here. We see more wolves growling, only to get beaten up by Suho, as he instantly defeats 2 of them, leveling up. He says there are still a lot of wolf types inside of here, and Beru says it's all free experience, so he can't let it go to waste. Suho then asks Fang why his attack dropped all of a sudden, and Fang asks if he thinks he would cooperate with him. Beru explains his ability is used against those weaker than himself, calling him a wolf, and shameful. Fang asks him what kind of hunter would target a prey stronger than itself. Beru says that Suho is that exact type of hunter. While they talk, Suho looks around at all of the mana crystals, and sees them just laying here. We see him walking into the ruins area, and he looks at all the hunters' corpses, and he starts to feel sad. Beru tells him there's nothing he could have done, and Fang says that he killed all of those who dared to intrude upon his place, and that it was his mission to guard the sanctuary in the first place. Suho grabs onto the sword, slamming it into the ground, telling him to be quiet. As we see, shadow extraction can be used on the hunters. Suho asks about it, and Beru says that any corpse can be turned into a soldier, regardless of where it is from. Suho stretches his hand out, but then stops himself and instead picks up the hunters. Beru asks if he is not going to do it. He says nah. Making them fight after death is just another punishment. Beru feels touched, and Fang doesn't say anything. We see him put them into a minecart, and Suho asks about how this is the sanctuary of a monarch, and says that since his father is one, asking what they are, and asks how Itarum is connected to this. Beru says he can think of Itarum as his king's current enemy, and the monarchs as his previous enemies. Including his king, there are a total of 9 monarchs. His father, the great Sung Jinwoo, is the king of the dead, the Shadow Monarch. There's also the king of beasts, the monarch of fangs, the queen of insects, the monarch of plagues, the king of monstrous humanoids, the monarch of the iron body, the king of demons, the monarch of white flames, the king of giants, the monarch of the beginning, the king of snow folk, the monarch of frost, the king of demonic specters, the monarch of transfiguration, and finally the king of berserk dragons, the monarch of destruction. Although all 9 monarchs possess strength beyond comprehension, when the 8 other monarchs invaded Earth, they all died at the hands of Jinwoo. Fang says it's right, and that his master did indeed die to the Shadow Monarch. If only his strength were untarnished, he would have ripped him apart and fed him to the wolves. Suho says it's not like he doesn't understand his feelings, and that his dad must have fought the other monarchs in order to protect the Earth, and that he simply wanted to protect this place from the hands of invaders. Both sides acted in order to protect what was important to them, but there's something that is bothering him, and that's his notion that he has to fight him just because he's the blood of the Shadow Monarch. He says if protecting this place is his mission, then isn't it a stupid move to act hostile towards him when his father defeated his master? Fang asks what he's talking about, and Suho says he just wants to see his parents, and he can't do to Itarum. And as long as he can reach that goal, he intends on drawing power from anything. If Itarum begins their invasion, this place won't escape that chaos either. So if he helps him, he'll help him protect this place. Fang starts to debate if he would even cooperate with him, and Suho picks him up, asking about how the Shadow and Fang can work together. The next day, at a cafe, we see some interviewers asking Lim to explain what happened in the D-rank dungeon yesterday. Lim says he'll tell them everything, and he says that even as an E rank, he's sure the way Suho is treated will improve if he gets recognition, and this is a good chance to repay his debt. That evening, an article appeared on the internet detailing an incident where an E-rank hunter rescued hunters entirely on his own. The article included interviews from everybody that was saved by Suho. We see it jumps to a man saying it's time to pick up a few porters, and we learn that it is the Black Tortoise Guild's management team, specifically the second. One of them says yes, and that they desperately need new members, and that they need more E-rank hunters. We're introduced to a man named Lee Young-ho, which is the leader of this team. He says he's sending them a current E-rank, asking what they think of this one. We see a man on his computer who is reading all of the information about the article. He stands up asking about it, and Young-ho says that if a big guild like them snatches this guy up, it would make a killer headline, a hero rising from E-rank, and that he wants to contact him immediately. We see Young-ho putting his phone down, asking his men if Suho has replied, saying that since he was invited to their guild he'd probably like it a lot. The man looks a bit down, telling him that he actually declined. Young-ho is surprised, asking how he would decline their guild, asking if it makes sense for him to refuse an offer like theirs. The man tells him that he's not planning to join any guilds. Young-ho asks if he thinks he's some kind of S rank, and the man tells him that he'll probably call them back sooner or later, as he'll realize how hard it is to not be in a guild. We see Suho doom scrolling through his phone, saying that he's been getting a lot of offers from guilds after returning from the dungeon. Beru tells him that there are a lot of people who covet his talent. Suho says that all of them are trying to hire him as either a collector or a porter, and he wonders why so many of them are contacting him. Obviously, the reason is Lim. He says if he joins a guild it would only hinder his growth through the leveling system, so there's no need for him to join one. Suho says that's that, and looks over asking Fang if he wants to continue their conversation. Fang wonders what's wrong with him, asking how he could say something so absurd like working together. However, if that shadow becomes an ally and not an enemy, it might be worth it. Fang says he has one condition, telling him to take him to a different sanctuary of his monarch. Suho asks if he knows how to get there, and Fang says that he can find its location no matter how far it is. He can already feel the gate that leads to the sanctuary has disappeared, and it's probably what his kind refer to as a dungeon break. Suho says that means it has turned into a field-type dungeon. A field-type dungeon is a type that has become deserted due to a dungeon break, and monsters inhabit the area. We see him telling his uncle that he's going to go outside for a bit and not to worry about him, even if he doesn't contact him for a bit. We see him all dressed up, saying that it's time to head to the sanctuary. Deep in the mountains, we see him at a gate, and he asks Fang if he's sure it's here. Fang says yes. Suho says that this is going to be hard, as it is a place occupied by a hunter guild, and it is illegal to trespass into private property, and that he has heard of the Hyena Guild, as they are a gangster guild. Beru says instead of listening to that small creature, it's better to level up and increase his power. Beru is surprised, asking Suho what he is doing, and he tells them to get ready to enter. As we see him using his ruler's authority, Beru asks what he can do about the guild. As we see him controlling the camera, Suho says there is a way for everything, and he pulls it off the wall, shattering it, saying that there's nothing they can do if there is no evidence. Beru says the way he does things without hesitation resembles the Monarch a lot, and we see him heading in. Suho wonders if field-type dungeons usually have this much fog. Beru explains that the fog is magic from outer space, and it forces the dimensional barrier to break and generate rifts in the world. Fang says that because of that fog, the synchro hues wander through the rift and end up connected to Earth. Beru explains that beings from outer space are drilling a huge hole in their dimension to send troops in, and that's because the more magic power they have, the more they are affected by the movement, just like him. Suho asks if that means it's going to take time for the strong ones to get here. He says if that's the case, he just needs to level up, as we see some monsters in front of him. There is the orange named Razor Claw Briga, Black Shadow Razan as well, and Fang says it's time to show his power. Suho says he has guts, but he's not going to use them as his weapon, and he's thought of how he's going to fight from now on. And he's going to use his fist, as that's what he's familiar with. We see him using his ruler's authority to pull monsters close to cover the gap for his mid and long range. He then grabs onto Fang and swings him around using Storm Slash, saying that this will be a perfect combination, and that pairing all of these together will be his new fighting style. Beru says that's all standing, and Fang is also impressed by his power, and says that the more enemies there are, the longer the fight gets. But also, he's getting stronger as well. At this rate, they will lose the war, no clue what this means. We see his shadow summons, and there are 5 of them. Suho says that after increasing his intelligence, the cap went up. Beru tries to tell him this is nothing, as his father is tens of millions, but Suho smacks his head, saying to be quiet. They head deeper into the forest, and Fang says they've made it. This is where the gate leading to the sanctuary is. We see an outpost. Suho says this is bad, as there are still people here at this hour. Beru says that there are always people doing their best to live. Suho wonders why they are here, saying that it's better to subjugate magic beasts during the day. He sees them moving the barricades out of the way as a car is on its way in. Suho is surprised as he sees people blindfolded and tied up, and that he must be looking at human trafficking. He asks Beru if he's seeing the same shit, and Beru says yes, and since they are trespassing, it would not be wise to take action. But he realizes quickly that he's not talking to anybody, and Fang tells him that he's been gone. Obviously, with his father being a violent crimes detective, and his grandfather a legendary firefighter, Suho grew up watching both of them, so he could not sit idly as this was going on. We see one of the men looking up to be greeted by his feet, and we learn that everybody in Suho's family has the habit of acting first once they see injustice. After kicking the man in the face, we see him start to fall over. Beru facepalms, and the rest of the summons watch. The hyena guild members are surprised by the attack, and we see the man smushed into the floor. Suho turns back, and they ask him who he is. He begins to realize that he moved before thinking, and that this is illegal. Wondering what to do, he then comes up with a solution, getting one of the summons to fly over to him, using them as a mask, asking them why they think that kidnapping people is fine, and what they are doing. The man says no, asking him who he is, saying that not only did he trespass, but he also attacked them first, asking if he wants to die. He then tells his men to charge in and get rid of him. We see one of the men trying to attack him, but Suho is dodging every single attack. He says from what he's researched, the average rank of this guild is D rank, and he shouldn't use all of his strength just in case. He taps one of the dudes, sending him flying, which collats the boss man behind them. He then jumps into the air, raising his legs, kicking both of the men in the face. Beru watches, saying that he has grown to a point where these people, who humans call D rank, are no match for him, and that he is deeply moved by this. Suho is just confused since he won too easily. We see his stats are significantly higher than where he started. He ties them all up, and Beru tells him that was a very clean finish. The people that were kidnapped thank him for helping, asking if he's a hunter from the association. He says something like that, and just tells them to inform the authorities when they save them, and he'll take care of everything else, so to make sure they escape to somewhere safe. Suho wonders why they kidnapped people in the first place, and Fang says that he can feel it. Suho asks what he's talking about. Fang says the reason he came here is just right over there. They lift up the garage door, and Suho is surprised as he sees cages with food all around, and realizes that this must be where they imprison people. Beru says that there's a vague energy, and he wonders why it feels familiar. They look over to see a dog in a cage, and Suho wonders why they have a puppy locked up. Fang says that it's not just a puppy, and that this dog is actually a descendant of the King of Beasts, the Monarch of Fangs. Right after losing the war against the Shadow Monarch, the Monarch of Fangs gave his surviving descendant a guard and evacuated it to the sanctuary. He believed that as long as his bloodline was not lost, another Monarch of Fangs would be born. Truthfully, he did not even wish for another monarch to be born. He just wished that his family line would not be severed. We see Suho free the dog, and Beru says that he can vaguely feel an energy that belongs to the Monarch of Fangs, and if they leave it be, it will definitely die, asking Suho what he will do. Suho goes to say something, but then we hear a voice asking what this is. Suho quickly puts the mask back on, and the man says since everybody outside was knocked out, he thought there would be more people, but it looks like there's only one left. Suho is surprised as he sees a monster instead. Then Beast says that the hyena guild was useless, and that he cannot trust humans. Fang then calls out to him, saying that he's surprised that Brocky is alive, and that he is the guard given to this descendant that he mentioned before. Brocky is surprised that Fang is alive as well, and Fang tells him that he couldn't have forgotten that he was sent here in order to protect the descendant, asking what he's been doing for things to have come to this state. Brocky instantly closes the gap, asking Suho why he has his hands on his possession. Suho realizes that he couldn't even react to the speed. Brocky then smiles and starts to go in for an attack after grabbing the puppy. Suho is able to react this time, but still gets knocked into the wall, shattering it, which causes him to fly out of the building into a nearby cargo container. Beru calls out for him, and we see the damage the attack had caused. Beru asks him if he's okay, and Suho says of all the attacks he's taken recently, this one hurt the most. Beru shouts that his head is bleeding, and Suho tells him that his head is ringing, so not to yell. We see that his resilience has leveled up, which gives him another 20% for physical defense. Beru says that when they arrived at this place, there was a vague energy that was left behind, and now he knows what it is, that it is Itarum, and he can feel the energy from Brocky. Fang asks Brocky if he understands what he's doing to the Monarch's descendant, and Brocky asks him how he thinks somebody who lost their sanctuary would maintain this amount of power. Survival of the fittest states only the strong survive, and the survival of the weak depends on the strong. It is the law of nature that the weak become nutrition as well. Although this puppy is weak, its origin stems from the Monarch of Fangs, and you could say it's the optimal source for nutrition. That's why he has been consuming it. He's been periodically drinking its blood, which has the Monarch's power. Fang starts to get pissed, and Brocky says that he'll make sure to kill Fang too, and laughs, saying he can't even do anything alone, asking what a half-blood could even do. The fact that Rakan died is just proof that he was weak. We see Suho stretch his hand out, using his ruler's authority to cut Brocky's monologue short, as it wounds his arm. We see Beru pick up the puppy while Brocky is distracted. Suho then starts to lift Fang back towards him, grabbing onto his handle. He tells Fang that he can tell he's pissed at Brocky, and that he also has something to settle with him, and that this is the first alliance between the Shadows and Fangs, and that he has finally found a clue that connects him to his father. We see Brocky calling him annoying, asking how dare a bug act like this, saying that he will kill him. We see a strange symbol in his eye. A quest appears, telling him to eliminate Brocky. Beru says he can't help but stand by and watch as he holds the dog. We see the puppy shivering as well. As he watches Suho's back as he squares up to Brocky, he thinks about the quest calling Brocky a hyena, saying now he thinks he knows where they got the guild name from. He wonders how a monster created a guild while kidnapping people, wondering how it's related to Itarum. We then hear the tied-up men screaming out to Brocky, saying to free them, and that Suho isn't an ordinary guy and they will join him as well. Suho says he won't stand by and watch that happen. We see Brocky open his mouth wide, biting all of their heads off in one clean motion. Suho is taken aback, and Brocky says thinking he'd need help facing someone like him is a sign that they were merely prey. Suho leaps in and swings at Brocky, who blocks it with his hand. It barely scratches him, and he asks why he just killed all of them. Brocky says the power of life and death over the weak belongs to the strong, wondering if there is a reason required for the strong to do what they please, throwing Suho backward. Suho catches his footing on the container but looks up, seeing Brocky is close. He narrowly avoids the attack, and Brocky goes for a follow-up, which gets avoided. This happens 2 more times with Suho avoiding each attack. Brocky grabs onto the floor and smirks while lifting his hand up, releasing energy waves in the form of a claw. He then spots Suho no longer in front of him and looks up, seeing him coming down from the sky. Suho uses a storm slash, which leaves small cuts all over Brocky's body. Brocky laughs, asking if this is all he has, saying that this is pathetic for a relic that belongs to the Monarch of Fangs. Suho quickly uses his ruler's authority to shove Fang into Brocky's back, telling him he shouldn't speak when the fight is not over yet. Then he pulls the blade out, and Fang asks why he has changed like this, saying that he swore his loyalty and honored Sir Rakan, asking why he has changed like this. Brocky wonders if he truly did honor Rakan, but he can't play the memory back in his head due to the symbol as it completely controls his mind. He grabs onto Fang, saying no, and throws him onto the floor, shattering him. He says that he holds no respect for him and only surrendered to Rakan's strength at the time, asking if he thinks he'll continue to live such a weak life. Brocky calls out to Suho, saying this isn't the time to be worrying about somebody else, punching him in the stomach, calling him a worm. We see blood beginning to pour out from Suho's eyes, and he says he feels like his bones are going to break. However, knowing that his father is fighting at this moment, he won't sit idly by. He stops himself from falling over and recalls his shadows to his fist. He rears it back, punching Brocky in the stomach, creating a shockwave, saying he refuses to collapse here. They start trading a barrage of blows with one another, and Fang watches from the ground. He says that his strength is leaking out from his body and wonders if this is how it ends for him. Saying that he wants to fight more, he hears somebody say ow, and he snaps out of his depression, and he sees the little puppy standing up on his own. The puppy's glaring at him, and Fang says he understands. We see Suho and Brocky trading punches, and Fang realizes that he's inspired by his fighting spirit. The little puppy stands up and begins to growl, and Fang says that he finally understands what he's meant to do, and he can give the strength left to him to work to the descendant. He begins to fade out after doing so. The puppy begins to grow larger while howling. We see a big attack coming in from Brocky. Suho blocks it but still gets sent flying, and he is clearly gassed out. He puts his fist back up, and we see that he only has 21 health remaining out of 2,350. He says he thought he'd grown up somewhat, but he doesn't even know if he'll be able to defeat Brocky. Brocky leaps in, telling him to die, and starts stabbing towards his face. We see the puppy dash off the ground as it bites onto Brocky's arm as it has tripled in size. Brocky is surprised to see that it actually left a deep wound on his arm. The puppy lands on its feet while growling at Brocky, and a quest appears asking Suho if he wants to recruit Fang's descendant as a colleague. Suho is surprised by how much the little puppy has grown up in that short time. Brocky says that Rakan's descendant must have absorbed the mana from Fang. Suho realizes as well that Fang must have sacrificed himself to save it. And since he was going to cooperate with Fang from the beginning, he has no reason to refuse the cooperation request. They both feel something instinctually after he presses the button, and he says something is flowing into his mind. He sees Brocky telling the little puppy that they have lost the war against the Shadow Monarch. This world, after all, follows the rule of survival of the fittest, and that he needs to make sure to become strong so that the Fang can prosper again. But then it jumps to the puppy crying and shivering in fear as we see multiple people forcing Brocky onto his knees. Brocky asks what they are doing and why they aren't killing him. We see a small baby child saying that this looks like a useful monster and it's just what he needs and that he will choose this one. And they start to put a crystal into Brocky's eye. Brocky screams in pain, and the puppy watches, and they say that Hyena Brocky's duty from now on is to capture humans alive and deliver them to them. The thing they planted in him will help him by increasing his strength. Of course, depending on who uses it, the desires they hold can become beyond twisted. As we see the puppy mortified by the expression Brocky is making, Suho realizes that they were the dog's memories and that the people who planted something into his eye must be directly connected to Itaru. And that the descendant doesn't want to get revenge on Brocky but instead wants to stop his rampage. If this is somehow connected to their plan, he must defeat Brocky but he doesn't have the power to win against him as it currently stands. A new quest appears for recruiting a colleague. And we see that he needs to recruit all of the Monarch's descendants as his colleagues. And that he unlocked a bond skill due to his first. Then both of their bodies begin to glow with an aura. A bright light begins to emerge from where they were standing, making Brocky close his eyes. Even Beru is confused, saying that this has never happened to his king before. Brocky says he doesn't know what's going on but this isn't a shonen anime where he's going to let them power up. We see him coming in for a big punch. He definitely connects with something as we see it create a giant shockwave from his punch. But as the smoke begins to settle, we see that a notification appears saying that the skill was successful. As we see a hand has stopped Brocky's punch. Suho's hair is now white, and he has a black cross on his forehead. And he wonders what's going on. We learn that the skill is called Beast Possession, and it costs 1 mana a second. By letting the Fang's descendant dwell in his body, his strength will be increased, and his senses will be as keen as those of a beast. Brocky comes in for another, wondering what's going on. But Suho easily avoids the attacks, saying that his body feels so light and his senses are very sharp. And he can sense the optimal movements to avoid danger. He doesn't even have to take a step to avoid all of his attacks. And he says if it's now, he can easily fight back as he kicks Brocky in the head, causing his body to lift off the ground. Brocky wonders where the sudden strength of power came from and says there's no way this is the dude he just fought. Brocky's eyes begin to show that symbol again, and he says that he refuses to lose, as a halo forms above his head. He says if he does, he will lose everything he's worked so hard for. He punches again, this time with even more strength, which actually does knock Suho back a bit. Beru realizes how much his mana has increased. And Brocky says he doesn't know what he did, but one thing is for sure, he will never lose to a human. In the end, the difference in power comes from the difference in species. He hits with another strong attack, causing Suho to slide backward across the ground. He goes in for a follow-up, saying just blame himself for being a weak human. But we see Suho meet his fist in the air, which makes the sound as if Braki has collided with the metal. Braki's hand is knocked backward and spirals uncontrollably as it breaks his entire arm. He looks back at it, in disbelief. And we see Suho has learned the skill unarmed combat, and that he will do 33% additional damage to enemies when using his own fist. Beru asks how dare he speak of the difference in species in front of the young monarch, and there is no way anything could be above the species of the Shadow Monarch. Braki gets a shiver down his spine as he realizes that Suho is a direct descendant of the Shadow Monarch. Suho swings his foot down, axe kicking Braki's skull in, causing him to get buried deep into the ground, destroying the terrain. We hear the loud sound of the attack, and Suho's hair begins to slowly lose its hue as it turns back to black. He is clearly gassed out from the fight as he stands above Braki. With his jaw being shattered, Braki does his best to mutter the words that he needs to become stronger. We see the puppy quickly go over and start licking him, and Braki's eyes slowly start to turn back to normal, and he says that now he remembers why he had to get strong in the first place. He starts to recall Rakan and apologizes, saying that he was furious that he couldn't protect him. The little puppy starts to howl, and we see that he has completed his quest and leveled up twice. If you've watched till the end, comment, Beru, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.